So today we have like two great guests, and I guess so. These two guys, we can actually call them like guru of venture industry. And I guess any of my introduction, I guess will diminish their efforts in that industry. And I guess these two guys can actually introduce themselves much better than I can. Well, and we also have like special guest, our colleague, Alisher Shaykhov. So Alisher is like...
he's a guru too.
Yes, it's a guru for the local market. Everybody knows Alisher. Because he has like tremendous experience as the as ambassador in Great Britain. I guess he has like pretty big international experience and pretty big in-depth experience of international relations. That's why actually Shaykhov is advisor of UzVC, National Uzbek Venture Capital Fund.
Yeah.
So, guys, let's start. So please,
please.
Marvin, please.
Okay, all right. So thank you for having me, and it's great to be in Tashkent.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. So I forgot to introduce you.
Oh, that's all right.
Marvin Liao and Asher Siddiqui. Siddiqui. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe I'll give you a little bit of background and maybe why I'm here. So my name is Marvin. I'm Canadian of Taiwanese immigrant parents, born in the U.S., raised in Canada, lived in Asia and Europe for a couple of years, and I moved to San Francisco 22 years ago. So I've been in the tech industry now for 22 years because that's pretty much an industry town, right? So I did the startup thing, and actually another story, incidentally, about just sort of how element of like being in the right place at the right time. My first job was actually not in tech. My first job there was I joined a PR firm, and I was so bad they fired me on my birthday, which actually was really good in retrospect. So I lasted about 3 months, and then I joined a tech startup. Very, very early, I ran online marketing for them, raised about $63 million, went from 18 people to 150 people in 6 months. Okay. And then the dot-com bubble imploded. We were about to go public. The dot-com bubble imploded, went the other direction, and then I lasted about like a total over there 2 years, but that worked out quite well. So I ended up joining a company that people may or may not have heard of, like Yahoo. So I joined very early, like maybe when Yahoo was about 2,800 people globally. And so I rose through the ranks. I ended up running some of the international expansion departments and groups there. So I ended up, when I left Yahoo, we were about 10 and a half years later on, we were about 15,000 people after we fired like 5,000 people, doing like $7 billion in revenue a year. So just really interesting company, right? And I left, took 2 years off, boards, observatory boards, mentored at, I think, 24 different startup accelerators just for fun. I angel invested, and then ended up joining a small little VC fund called 500 Startups and started their San Francisco office, ran their core accelerator program, and was a main investor for Fund 3 and Fund 4, the global funds. And so I left end of 2019, and now I run my own fund. And so I have a small fund called Diaspora that focuses on at the pre-seed stage, European founders coming to the U.S. market, and also run an angel fund with a business partner of mine from Saudi Arabia called Sukna Global. We focus on Series seed all the way to Series A deals, all global. And so kind of wear two different hats, and I sit on a lot of investment committees too.
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I used to run a gaming holding company for the last 2 years, and I left end of September. So.
Yeah.
And Marvin is too modest because Marvin, when he says that he built the San Francisco office, he also built the flagship accelerator for 500 startups. That was what 500 was known for. So
just got lucky.
Well, a lot of hard work and a lot of smarts, and he invested in like 450 companies during his time through
It
those
took me
years.
414 at 500.
Okay,
I've done more since
440.
then, but yes.
Come on.
Yeah, whatever. Yes, like give or take a couple, right? So. Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Yeah. And so a little bit about me. So Asher Siddiqui. So I was born in London. I'm from the UK, but of Pakistani Indian immigrant parents. I actually come from 5 generations of doctors. So I am a failure to my parents because I did not become a doctor. I started out, my professional career started out in the 90s. So in the late 90s, I was at university. I already had been a serial business person, a kid running business, making money. And what I realized when I was doing all these businesses on the side was I felt like I was wasting my time in the UK. So as soon as I graduated in 98, I packed my bags and I moved to the US. And I didn't know anybody there besides my brother. I ended up in Indianapolis, then moved around to Chicago, St. Louis, LA, and then ended up in the Bay Area. And I worked for myself. So I was a self-taught Java developer, and then I eventually did an MSc as well in software engineering. But I bootstrapped my way for the first 7 years. I met customers, I met people who had problems. And I was like, oh, I can solve that with software. So I would use, Java or JSP. I would build web applications and I would solve their problem. But then instead of selling them the source code, what I would do is I would tell them, because it would take me 6 months to find a customer. And so you can't then spend another 6 months, and then pay off the credit card debt. So I was like, this is not going to work. So I would say, well, what are you going to do with the source code anyway? So how about you sign a 5-year contract and I'll take care of everything. And what that gave me was a business. I mean, it wasn't like an amazing business, but it was a business of a subscription sort of type model.
SaaS before SaaS.
SaaS before SaaS, but I wasn't smart enough to think of SaaS. So I came up with stupid things like pay as you use. And how I came up with pay as you use is because the UK was actually an innovator in the mobile space they innovated and they launched this thing called pay as you go, which is like instead of having a contract for your mobile, you could have a pay as you go thing. And as a student, I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I was like, you know what, pay as you use. Anyway, and I scaled I got to 100K annual recurring revenue in year one. So I was like, this is amazing. And it's like a one-man show with 15K in costs. So this is great, but I still didn't know how to raise money. I didn't know how to go and talk to founders. One of the problems that I also found that I was disadvantaged was I didn't really talk about myself. I felt shy to ask for money. I felt shy to talk about what I had done because I thought I had done nothing. And that's when I realized my British education was a problem for me because, in the US, there was these kids who had done nothing and they would talk about themselves and they'd raise millions of dollars and I'd be like, well, I haven't really done much.
Humility doesn't help in the U.S.
Humility doesn't help, and I've learned that the hard way. So anyway, that's the first 7 years of my career. So I was doing okay, but my parents were getting worried about me, and they were like, you're doing this entrepreneurial thing. So you remember, my mother, her expectation was for me to be a doctor. I told her I was a software engineer. She's like, that's not even an engineer. That's like a fake engineer. Or sounds like a fake engineer.
And bear in mind, that was 90s, right?
That was 90s.
So it's this is way before tech startups and things were
tech was not when she would look at work for a company, then she'd look at how about Lever Brothers or Johnson and Johnson or P&G,
something you can tell your friends.
Yeah, exactly. Something you can tell your friends. Anyway, so first 7 years, that's kind of what I did, and then what happened is I went to Dubai on holiday, and I went to Dubai and I met a girl. And so my career sort of and life sort of took a shift. So I needed an excuse to stay. So to see if this relationship was going to go anywhere. And so I ended up joining Etisalat, which is a telecom operator. This is totally random. I met a guy in an elevator who was my neighbor. And he was one of the investment team. He was from the US, 50s, in his late 50s. And he was like, we could use people like you, entrepreneurial, to do M&A. I was like, what the hell is M&A? Mergers and acquisitions, that's investments. And he was like, we're looking for people to retrain them and build this business through M&A, to buy and invest. So I joined as an analyst in 2006. In 3 years, I was the youngest vice president in the company. In 4 years, I was head of investments for Asia. In 5 years, I was global head of M&A. I led $15 billion worth of M&A transactions. I learned a different trade, and I found out that I was really good at it. And one of the things that I found that why I was really good was because I was not a corporate. monkey. I wasn't somebody who'd been through the corporate ladder. I was an entrepreneur working for myself. So when I thought about doing my job, I thought of doing my job as a shareholder. So I thought from the shareholder perspective.
An owner.
As an owner. And what I thought, and politics didn't matter. So if somebody wanted my area, I'd be like, sure, take it. In fact, let me help you. Because, we're all going to succeed together. And so that collaborative thing, I think, is what led me to, and also the other thing was because I was stupid and dumb and I didn't know anything, I asked a lot of stupid questions. And when people asked me a question I didn't know, I'd be like, listen, I can't tell you the answer, but I need to do 1, 2, 3, and then I'll get back to you. And then they'd be like, okay, this guy's actually kind of structured. Anyway, but I did get bored of doing M&A. And also by this time, that girl is now my wife, and I have a family. I have a daughter. By that time, one child, one daughter. Today I have 2 daughters. And so I was like, the reason for joining Etisalat is over. Like, I wanted the girl, I got the girl. Let me go back into tech. So when I wanted to leave, my boss said, hey, why don't you do corporate venture capital? If you want to do venture, let's do corporate. So I tried a couple of years doing corporate VC, but it was tough. A corporate environment, it took me 18 months to do a $5 million investment. And it took me, in parallel, I did 2 deals. One 18-month investment, $5 billion, which was Moroctel. And so it took me 18 months to do 5 billion and 18 months to do 5 million. So I realized I'm in the wrong place. Anyway, 2016 I left, and then I joined 500 Startups as a partner in Fund 4 with Marvin, and then eventually helped manage 500s through a difficult period, and then eventually became one of the managing partners of the firm and on the global investment committee of 500 Startups with Marvin, and I had a lot of cool people like Marvin to learn from. I left just before Marvin in the early 2019. I left 500 Startups, and when I left, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. I thought I wanted to do another fund, but I kind of wanted to take a break. So what I did was and what happened also coincided when I left 500, a bunch of the investors, including Marvin, started to think about leaving and did sort of leave in the next sort of 12 months. And what I did is I started working with all of these people in helping them figure out what they're going to do next. And so that led to me becoming what I call a GP coach. GP is a term, a general partner. So basically these general partners were basically building their own independent company, firms, VC funds. And so I started helping them figure out how they could build their own institutional VC fund. And I started doing that with my 500 friends, and then I also started doing that with my own friends and colleagues. And so long story short, in the last couple of years, I've helped to launch 6 different VC funds. I'm on the advisory board and investment committee of some of these funds. And then in that process, I was helping a bunch of friends of mine in the Middle East launch Sukna Ventures. And then they basically asked me if I'd want to be one of their co-GPs. So I joined them. So, that's what I am today. I'm a general partner at Sukna Ventures, which is a MENA-FIC focused fund. And so, Marvin and I kind of work together, I guess, because I work at Sukna Ventures on the VC fund, which is focused only on the MENA region. And then Marvin is at Sukna Holding, which is basically doing global investing. So we find ways to work together and
work with friends. That's the best way.
Yeah, that's right.
Work with friends and work with people you like and trust. And that's actually the best thing about entrepreneurship in general, right? Like, as whether you're doing a startup or whether you're doing a VC fund, like, it's entrepreneurial. There's very different things, but ultimately it's about controlling your own destiny, right?
Yeah.
Like, we talk about this all the time. And just like this idea of freedom. People are like, what does freedom mean? I'm like, freedom for me is like, I work with the people I want to work with. I spend the days and I spend my time in places and with people that I want to spend time and sort of like energy with, right? And if I don't like something, like the minute something's sort of getting boring or I don't want to do it anymore, you can leave, right? Yeah. Like, that's actually what freedom is. And so ultimately, entrepreneurship is freedom. The ultimate of if you set it up right.
Yeah. It's amazing journey.
Yeah.
Just got lucky, right?
Yeah, we just got lucky. And well, actually, there's a part of luck and there's a part of chaos. So I believe in the chaos theory, which is, you create opportunities by, you meet people, you go out, instead of going to a new city and staying in the hotel room and ordering the room service, I step outside and I walk and I meet people, I see things, and that creates chaos, that creates opportunities. And so, ultimately it's just about being open to, I mean, I think a lot of people could have the career trajectory that Marvin and I have had if they were basically just open to,
I mean, that old saying is, I think, I couldn't remember who wrote this. It's some scientist, Blaise Pascal, somebody said it's like, chance favors the prepared mind.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a huge element of that, of just, if you asked me, like, when I first went to San Francisco, like, this is 99, like, oh, you're going to be a VC. I was like, what's a VC? Like, back then, VC is like Viet Cong, like Victor Charlie, like you didn't know what that is, right? But, it's just, you fall into it. I think there's an element of sort of like the environment, but also I think sort of you end up following into it when you meet the right people and things. And yeah, that's just, I feel so grateful. I think I just feel very grateful. I worked very hard. I have to admit, I worked very, very hard to get here. But also, there's a huge element. I will never discount the element of luck. I will never discount the element also of just the hard work and just being in the right place at the right time. Yeah. I couldn't have this career if I was staying in Canada.
Oh. Yeah.
I just never would have had it, or I would have had it way, way later in my career. I couldn't have done this. And so there's a term I use all the time. It's just like, and I've written about this, called global maximum versus local maximum, right? And so, the way I think about this was like, growing up in Vancouver was great, but all I really understood was the local maximum. I only really understood the sort of like the top was like very, very low. I didn't know that at the time, right? And then you kind of, like, I'll use the example of why I love Japan so much was that, I was a young kid, 15 years old, went on a school trip, never traveled, right? Didn't really go anywhere. And so you think your whole world's like Vancouver. It's like Vancouver's like 1.5 million people. You're like, oh, Vancouver, like this is an amazing place. And then I went, first trip by myself with my school, with my school friends, is a school trip. Japan this was 89, when I was 15. You go to Tokyo in 89, 30 million people, and you're like, there's more people in this one city than there is in like all of Canada, right? And you're like, your brain is just like, whoa, like your limits disappear. And that was just sort of like, for me, that was Silicon Valley. It was just like, at the startup I was at, Alibaba, like everyone there was super, super smart. And I was like, wow, like this is the best. Like everyone's going to be so smart. I'm going to stay here for the next 10 years. And then the dot-com bubble imploded. I ended up at Yahoo. Everybody over there was so smart, right? It was just on a whole nother level of just like smartness. And you're like, wow. Like just like you don't know sort of what's possible. Then you get exposed as a VC to all these like young, super smart like kids, and they're all kids, but like entrepreneurs. You're like, wow, like my understanding of what is like really smart and what is really talented is just on another level now. And so just like once you know what's possible, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
right.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing journey, amazing careers. But I guess our audience will be interested in one very amazing question. What actually, what made you come here?
What the hell are we doing?
Yeah, what the hell are we doing here?
That's a great question. So actually, so that's also again, it's. I'll start with a little bit of a story in terms of like how it all started, and this is a people business, and like everything. I mean, we're social animals, and so. How it started was pretty much how my life started, where I meet people and I'm open to opportunities. And so this particular journey started with AKS. So AKS, our London-based consulting firm, and they introduced me to Dr. Shaykhov. And Dr. Shaykhov was thinking about how to develop the ecosystem, and he just wanted to talk to people and get ideas. And so I started talking to Dr. Shaykhov, and Marvin was the first person to introduce me to Uzbek cuisine in Moscow, lagman, etc.
Oh my God, lagman!
The first thing I was thinking was, okay, let me rope in Marvin on this because he must know. And I didn't realize that he constantly goes on about Uzbek cuisine like he's a local. But then I was like shocked to realize he'd never been to Uzbekistan. And I was like, okay. So really, then we started engaging with Dr. Shaykhov and sort of just sharing our ideas and our views. And then Dr. Shaykhov then introduced us to UzVC and the UzVC team, and that started this whole chain reaction, which led to the event that we did today. Well, actually, a couple of things. I joined the supervisory board of UzVC, and Marvin is soon to join that as well. So I'm roping in other smart people smarter than me. I like to be the dumbest person in the room, so we need to get a few more Marvins around UzVC. So and so we started by supporting this ecosystem. So UzVC is sort of one part of that thing. And so what did we do today, and what are we doing for the next couple of days? Is we need an excuse to come here. So UzVC then arranged this event today where we came, Marvin and ourselves, as keynote speakers, and then we had a bunch of other people that UzVC arranged to bring here. The topic of the forum today was from Silk Road to Silicon Valley, or I would say either way, like Silicon Valley to
Silicon Valley, Silk Road,
right
Silicon
now
Valley.
It's one way, but it's both ways. And so the whole idea is we had this very interesting event today where we talked about global venture capital trends. We talked about what is the origin of Silicon Valley? How did Silicon Valley come about? What were the key ingredients of Silicon Valley? What makes it special? And then we talked about what are we seeing in Uzbekistan, and what are the things that are going on in Uzbekistan? How could we
supercharge the
How could we supercharge and accelerate that? Because we don't need to necessarily develop the ecosystem over 30 years like it took in Silicon Valley. We could actually do that in 5 to 10 years, but it requires commitment and resources and talent to galvanize all of that.
And I think it's also very important to talk about who the audience is, right? Because if you look at the audience, there's fairly, I think it's over, you said like 200, 300 people registered for it. There are just a lot of people. Yes. And my understanding was just like it was a lot of students, which is great because you want to expose. I wish I was exposed to stuff like this as a university student. I think I would just had a very different view. So that's really important. And then startup people as well as government and sort of like, I think what they call like investors. And so people from the ecosystem. And I'm a very, very big believer of these type of sort of events, of like these summits, right? So for example, everyone knows like the Web Summit, right? Or it used to be the Dublin Web Summit. That put Dublin on the map. And then when they moved to Lisbon, that put Lisbon and Portugal on the map. I discovered Portugal back in 2015. I was like, oh, this place is amazing. Then I think that moved like in 2017, they moved the Web Summit. That literally put like Portugal on the startup map, right? Like that's a place that everybody goes to hang out. No different than, say, for example, if you're in the SaaS industry, like you go to two big events, right? It's SaaStr in Silicon Valley, done by Jason Lemkin. Like that's the biggest SaaS event, so everybody flies in from everywhere for that. And you meet and talk with other sort of like SaaS entrepreneurs, or SaaSdoc in Ireland, which is it's like the best SaaS event in the UK. So these summits are actually really, really critical to sort of like supercharge the ecosystem, share best practices, and even better if you have like outsiders. And so it's like, it goes to this idea of like having ideas have sex, right? Like it is like just like new different points. It's super important. Like it really is.
It's alchemy.
It's alchemy. And so, and this is actually why I still spend a lot of my time, my own money. Like I go to a lot of different conferences, not just tech conferences. Like I'll go to like online marketing conferences. I'll go to like influencer, which is like creator, influencer stuff. I had nothing to do with like startups, but it's just like, wow, I can learn from these like I went to this one very expensive conference called the Leveling Up Mastermind. It was all like direct-to-consumer companies. It was all like these influencers who had like, one lady went on stage and she was just like, I have 10 million followers, and she showed all her learnings, top 10 learnings on how to do better in YouTube. I'm like, you always learn new things, right? And so all these are things that you can actually bring these ideas into your companies and help them think about new things. So it's just like, it's really critical. So it's not just tech conferences, but go to other conferences and bring new ideas back, and go to other countries and bring new ideas back, and vice versa. So that's why we travel.
And so today's summit was a little bit like that, creating that sort of alchemy, that catalyst. And then we also launched a program, an UzVC Growth Program from today, which Marvin and I are going to be running.
Spending 2 full days tomorrow with a bunch of companies, like a boot camp.
So it's like a 2-day boot camp where a bunch of UzVC portfolio companies and people in the ecosystem, we're spending 2 days with them and core curriculum on helping them figure out some of the basics, and then some of the selected companies are going to then go through a 3 to 4 month mentorship program with not just myself and Marvin, but once we get a better understanding of what their problems are and what they're trying to achieve, then we're going to match them up with other global mentors from Silicon Valley and other ecosystems wherever relevant, and take them through this mentorship program, and then so to develop them and to hopefully take them to the next level, and then hopefully we're going to we're aiming to have like a demo day where we can hopefully
like a showcase,
these,
right?
yeah, showcase them in April.
Yeah, and it's also a good way to actually make them like really, really get their act together because you're like,
Yeah.
you're going to show up, you better
Yeah.
better be doing something, right?
So we're trying to light the fire, push a little bit here. And I love the thing about the students. I wish more students would attend. I mean, same here. Like for me,
We want to do more of it. I think if we ever get invited back, of just like I think part of the agenda will be going and like speaking at universities and things.
Yeah.
This is something I spend a lot of time. I'd always speak to when student groups or universities or even students just want to talk or reach out. I'd be like, I'll spend half an hour talk with you or student groups and things because it's just about giving them exposure. I really, really believe it's just like you have to know it's possible. Yeah. And so for me, even if like one of them ends up doing something like where it's like, oh, I really rethought about my career and I'm going to go do this, I'm like, that's still worth it, right? Yeah. Like it's stuff I wish people did for me.
Yeah. But then we're not just doing Tashkent. So what I'm really excited about is
Samarkand. I'm so excited.
So we're doing Tashkent, but there's a lot more going on in this country. So we're over the weekend. We're also going to Samarkand and Bukhara, and UzVC's been very helpful and gracious, and UNDP and some of your other partners. They've arranged a couple of meetings for us. So we're doing a little bit of what I would call fun, but it's kind of work. We're actually doing a little bit of tourism, learning a little bit about, but also meeting a bunch of students and a couple of officials, and just seeing how we could help develop the ecosystem. So that's in it in a nutshell.
I just want to ask our special guest, Alisher Shaykhov, whether Alisher is like one of the not initiator of the Uzbekistan National Venture Fund.
Well, he's like the godfather.
He's a godfather.
He's the godfather of the ecosystem.
He's a godfather.
And I'm not saying that from my side. A lot of the, sorry to interrupt you there, but like I've spoken to several entrepreneurs yesterday over dinner, and the way they talked about Dr. Shaykhov is like he's the godfather. Even though it wasn't his role, he did it in his personal time. It's kind of like the godfather of the tech ecosystem. So there you go. Over to you, Dr. Shaykhov.
And Alisher, just briefly tell our audience what is the concept of a national venture fund, what is behind of this idea, and what actually makes you actually choose these two guys.
That's a good question. That's a good question.
So I think of course, it's a really good question because there is a lot of stories how it started again, and maybe started with the ecosystem of Uzbekistan because when the venture fund, UzVC, was founded by the government, of course, target was not just to build the fund. It was the idea just to start the venture business in Uzbekistan. Because target of the government to support and to provide some kind of solutions, to give the possibility for the private sector, young people to find some financing alternative to the debt financing, because everybody accustomed for that, and again, for the innovation is usually it's very difficult to get some financing from the banks, and that's the problem. And there's no many other the options except maybe some grants that's given by the some government institution or non-government institution or maybe some international donors. Yeah. So, but such kind of things, so getting the grants, of course, is not making the entrepreneurship, the spirit, or not train the young people to be entrepreneurs. And this is why the UzVC decided just to look into the situation that, we start to work first on the legislation. We found that, yes, we can find a solution. But actually, there is no so big problems with that because actually for the startups, they can do their business. For the ventures, yes, there is some maybe some bottlenecks. That's let's say some kind of barriers to be really very strong to develop that. But in the first stage, we think that the first problem was just to see who they have to invest. Yeah. If there is no, I always saying, if you're the fisherman, you have to look to the fish. If there's no fish, so why are you going somewhere for the fishing? So this is why we decided just to change a little bit the mandate of the UzVC fund and to look to the more to the not in the institutional building, because institutional building as usually is developing the fund itself, but we thought about ecosystem building, and of course thanks for the UzCard venture, the same as other partners, Alaco venture. The same for the association that with the help of the UzCard was established. I think that was give a lot of the ideas, and we always, the team of the UzVC found that, we have to build the first something, the community. And again, we organized different things, but after that we found, yes, the legislation, yes, the one issue, the second one is the community, the third is to develop the startups, the fourth will be the network, international network. And of course, that's happened that Weiss from the AGS, the company that whom I met in London being as ambassador. And besides that, I have visited a lot of the events in UK related to the venture business, the startups, because UK is the, say, number one in the world as the really organizing the best ecosystem and having a lot of the businesses in this field. And I was very lucky just to see good people, to find good places, to see some kind of challenges the UK facing in the startup business. And I found that, yes, we have a lot of the good ideas, we have a lot of good people, but what we're missing, I found that we are missing that's maybe training the people on the right way and the problem of the mindset.
Yeah.
Startups, they don't see the market. They really they don't understand what that's the metrics, and usually looking that's trying to find financing without understanding for what they actually need that. So as we decided just to work also with not only with the locals as we start to work here, of course, we work with the government, but we found that yes, international network extremely important, and that's why it came the idea. So let's look to the Silicon Valley. Why? Because it's very strong. As Marvin mentioned, that a lot of the, let's say, the events taking place, a lot of 1,000 people are coming, exchanging with the views. That's something we're missing in Uzbekistan, definitely. Besides that, maybe some startups, venture companies are visiting United States, Dubai, and other places, so they have some access. But policy of the UzVC is inclusive approach, because we have to see there's in the region, as the 10 million young people who is living in Uzbekistan, all of them have the ideas. Some may be the good, some may be wrong ideas, but actually they have. And among of these 10 million definitely should be something that will be really can approach the market, not only in the global market with a good idea, because we're facing the same problem, especially today. Marvin gave some ideas about let's say the priorities for the ventures, and he mentioned about the project, let's say impact, climate tech. So for us, when we're facing with the problem of RLC, the drinking water, there's the deterioration of the say even the air in Tashkent. So that's the huge opportunity, because if they will resolve this issue, that will be a lot of the explosion of different projects, and of course there's the scale up of them. It's absolutely easy, and we are having the strong scientific research institutions who specialize on that, but they have no idea about the commercialization. So that's the good thing, the same as the chemistry between the private sector, scientific research institutions, and universities, because they can develop it. And with that, we came to the question, who can help us with that? And as I said, I was very lucky. And after that, we met with Asher first, and he gave a lot of ideas and shared with his experience, not about Silicon Valley, but also the countries like many countries, the Pakistan and some other, Georgia, Saudi Arabia. And all these countries, of course, was very attractive because I knew Georgia very well, and I have been there many times. But this very small country, and for Uzbekistan also, as the big country, 35 million people, of course, having such a big potential. And we started much more early in Kazakhstan for the startups. Many years ago, because it's just after the independence, we organized the first venture fund that was supported by the government. So at that time in Kazakhstan, they were not thinking about that. We were the first who introduced the mobile payment solutions. It's not only in the Central Asia, but almost all in the world. So, and of course, that gave us ideas. So we have to, let's say, catch this gap. and realize the potential. And so, the guidance, and after that, that was a good chance to see the Marvin. We have a lot of the, let's say, brainstorms, and we like it. I like it very much. I have already adjusted it.
Yeah, we've done it. For me, we've done a lot of late night Sunday and Monday night calls every morning.
Yes.
There was a lot of them. I remember.
Yeah,
That's
so
fun,
that was again. This was I call this like chemistry. Why? Because nobody from us just looked at the time. We thought that yes, we feel the chance. As the same as I don't remember who's mentioned today. This is the just it came as idea. Yes, it can be done. It's something that will be really reasonable to do that. And this is the why we start to work and thinking about how to organize the such kind. I call this like top-up acceleration, because we have a lot of the opportunity here in Uzbekistan. We have accelerators. We have also the here you have for the fintech acceleration. With the UNDP, we started 15 years ago. This is the startup initiative. We have also the British Council, who's organizing different things. So, but for instance, for me, it's always was the question, because I'm a little bit critical about the so-called technical assistance that's coming, and you are becoming too accustomed as the consumer without doing something that will be really generate not only ideas but generate some money for the people who is doing that.
Yeah.
So that should be returned from everything what's coming. Not only for us, because I'm really very critical taxpayer. When I'm paying some taxes, I have to think about what's going on. But I also think, being as ambassador in many European countries, Japan and UK, I also saw how the citizens of this country are very seriously concerned about the spending. So I thought almost saying we have to put the same culture and think how to spend the money properly, and how to help to the people in Uzbekistan to be to be rich, but using the very simple things through the investment, change the investment culture instead of buying the cars. Say a lot of the maybe the houses, real estate. There is some luxury goods, just to invest something to their children, to the children of maybe the friends, neighbors, and again that's helping them to combine the efforts and develop the country, and again to make these young people really very proud of their own some endeavor, some project that they can realize. So that's came during our discussion, because they were talking and we were thinking.
And I enjoyed our conversations, because one of the problems that I face when I go into like an emerging ecosystem, like for example Saudi Arabia, or actually even like Armenia or Azerbaijan, or like different ecosystems, when you talk to the private sector or the government sector, they're like, no, we're not going to do anything. Why? Because we can't create Silicon Valley or tech ecosystem because we don't have the talent. And you know what we found is that if you do the work, then actually the talent is always there. The problem is the talent needs to be incentivized to go into the private sector and do it. So like for example in Saudi Arabia, 5 years ago I was talking to private investors and they were saying that we don't have the talent, so we can't build a tech ecosystem. 5 years later, this last year, Saudi Arabia, $1 billion was invested into tech startups. Where are those tech startups coming from? They were there. The problem was the infrastructure wasn't there. The acceleration, the incubation, the regulatory stuff wasn't there. The capital wasn't there. So instead of doing direct, the government basically put fund of funds together, and they put angel investment groups together, and then they funded those angel groups. They funded those fund of funds in a co-matching grants. So they did this whole infrastructure thing to enable the private sector to come, and then all of a sudden, having let's just say have a bank job, you have a problem that 5 years you've been dealing with, a process issue in your bank, and you haven't solved it. All of a sudden you're like, you know what, now I see the potential, because I can get financing, I can get government support, I can get customer access. I'm going to go and I'm going to build that. And within a short period of 5 years, we've gone from zero to like one of the largest ecosystems in the MENA region. is Saudi Arabia. And that's just one example. It's the reason why I use it is because it's similar population. Obviously, it's a much richer country and a lot more resources, but still,
But I would argue that's a curse, right? Because
That
there's
is
so
a
much
curse.
resources. So they're like,
Absolutely.
oh, they can always fall back on it. I
Yeah.
think that's a curse sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you look at, like, for example, Georgia, our experience in Georgia, like a couple of years ago, I was still skeptical about seeing, sort of Georgian startups that I personally would want to invest in. And then, through the programming of going through hundreds of startups that go through these programs, eventually some fail, some pivot, some do
Most
whatever.
fail.
Most fail. But, eventually you get to gold. Gold doesn't, or diamonds. Diamonds in the rough. Well, there's a lot of rough, and then you find the diamond. So you kind of need to get comfortable. And so what I like is that journey that Dr. Shaykhov and we went to, is that you already understood that. And I think that was actually helpful for us, because often we need to educate people on that. And because of your exposure to other ecosystems, we didn't have to train you on that or explain to you that. You kind of got that. What you needed was, I guess, outside parties to help
But then it's
you.
the next step, right?
It's the next step. And then so now we're on the execution stage.
Yeah, certainly. But it's the one thing that's also important to maybe be familiar with. Of course, we talk with several hundred people, different mentors, investors, the venture capitalists, that's the business angels from all around the world. It's and of course among the mentors there will be also similar, really very rather famous people, very active ones, and who have a very rich experience. But we stop on these two guys. Why? Is because we thought that actually it's not only the experience. I think that's what they mentioned before in the beginning of our discussion. Is the friendship, is the feeling,
The chemistry.
is the feeling, the chemistry,
Yeah.
the feeling by heart. As we're saying that when you start to understand without the words, it's already something that you can do the business.
Yeah.
Because I think for the startups, what we are also sometimes missing, that there is the team, there is the feeling of the members of the team. And what I felt, and that's during our discussion with our team as the UzVC and Asher and Marvin, I think that we felt that, it doesn't matter who is speaking, me or Dilshot or maybe Donovan or Maksud, Abdulazal or others. So, I felt very comfortable. The same, all of them also felt comfortable. So was easier, because I can maybe not participate on the meeting, but we are making the follow-up. So that's something that was a little bit different compared with ours, because we talk and we work with the 500 stars. Also, we were thinking about organizing some acceleration here. We talk with the several others, the stars are plug and play. Also, Y Combinator and others about doing the Stanford, the Berkeley University. So I think that we really make a lot of research before we came to the conclusion that yes, we should do it. It's possible. And I remember when the Asher said, "Okay, don't think that's impossible," because my slogan is everything possible or nothing impossible.
Yeah.
So when he said this word, I said, "Okay,
That's it, yeah.
I see that's
the match.
That's the match."
yeah.
Yes. So we can do it. We can realize, because I'm a believer on possibility of the startups in Uzbekistan, as I said, because I have been as the chairman of Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I visited almost all the countries, and I work also with the same as my staff. We jointly work with the schools, and we found it's a lot of the interesting solutions related to the car building, to the energy issues, so oil and gas. So you can be surprised that young boys that's in maybe the 5th, 6th form, they have some ideas about the mobile phones, how to organize that. So it's unbelievable things, but what they were needed, again, just to see it, they look to the market, because as always, as I call myself and our generation as the semi-Soviet sapiens, we think differently, we don't realize what is the market, what not looking on that, but what we found, the young people, not being the Soviet sapiens, they think in the same way.
Yeah.
So that's the why, as we agreed, what we need legislation, as I said, it's okay. We can do it by ourselves internally. And fortunately, again, as also what's helpful for us just to move on to this stage, because we found that the stockholders who can take care about some points and who can focus on the point, not about general ecosystem, because as you know, there was so many research about ecosystem, but everybody just share with information, but nothing was done.
Nothing actually happens.
And after that, we found that, yes, Asian Development Bank, IFC, said, okay, let's take care about legislation. We'll help you, and USAID also help us also to introduce maybe some modality, train some venture companies how to work with that. The COICA take care about the startups, capacity building, training, working with the IT park, and also with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So we found that some universities doing some business, but what we're missing, yes, we have to think about this kind of the, let's say, of the top, of the best, the startups, because we need the showcase. We need just to have somebody who will say, yes, I did it, and others say, in Uzbekistan, everybody is following when you see there's some success. So, and it's happened. It's happened when we decided to have the model. It was not simple, I will say, because again, that the first time, it's big challenge because we have so many meetings. Also you're organizing, we're organizing, and other things. So, but everybody are asking. So, what is the next? Where's the Silicon Valley? the door that we can open. So, and we said, okay, let's match our interest. As you said, this is the two-way. If the Silicon Valley people will come here, after that we will go there. And that was the agreement.
That's the highway.
Yes, it's the highway, yes. And it's really with the side effects, with the universities, venture companies, startups, for the government, for the many, let's say, for acceleration processes also in Uzbekistan, for the private sector, just to be more, be aware. This is the why discussion today took place not only about the startups and venture business, it was also around the education, around also some possibilities for education. And the last but not the least, I think the point that when we agreed, many with whom we talk about the possibilities for the partnership suddenly decided to start the partnership. So that's the demonstrative effect, because
catalyst.
It's catalyst. Yes,
because everyone's talking about it, but when you start doing, all of a sudden they're like, oh, here's doing, let's join that. Let's get on the bus.
This is why we have now the big package of different companies who is going to come to start the acceleration. Even this is the plug and play, of course, they started, but actually we started to talk with them after when we talked with the Asher and Marvin about, there's this different platforms, you have to use that, you have to look that. And we didn't succeed maybe to bring the Turkish, say, rep office of the plug and play. It came from Germany, but doesn't matter who came, but it came. So, and the same, the Y Combinator also organizing its own event. I am sure that the 500 stars will come. And I'm always saying that, because it's always saying it's expensive. Yes, but as we're always thinking, yes, it's expensive when you're on a certain stage and you have to pay for that. But sometimes when you are trying to making efforts, becoming for them too expensive to come here, because we say, okay, it will be too much just to pay for you to have this business, because there are already others who's doing much better than you. So we should be competitive even in this field.
Shaykhov just mentioned and touched upon very, very strategic things, strategic level, what we need to do. Well, and my question to you guys, it's more like laser focus. What are those BAMs on the road? What should we do? Like not on a strategic level, maybe just on an everyday level. What those guys who's going to start their business, their startups, what they should know about that business, about that approach, what they should know and what should they do first. So what's your recommendation? what are those bumps in the road?
Yeah, practical.
Yeah, very super practical stuff.
Can I start with my
Yeah,
first
go for it.
point,
Yeah,
and then I
go for it.
want
Go for it.
Marvin
Go
to
for
go.
it. Go for
But
it.
just the one thing that I want, because I spent some time with a bunch of university students after the event, and so like what I told them is what I want to use this platform to say is that the first thing you need to do is just start. Don't think. There's a lot of kids who or people who will just think about and plan and build a plan upon a plan and plan. No, just start and then figure it out, like as you go along. And then that's kind of like the first catalyst. And then there's, of course, please, sorry, Marvin, I interrupted you, but like there's a whole
it's all good.
structure
That's right,
Marvin will
right.
kick off.
I mean, at the end of the day, I just think it's ultimately sort of like you have to have, there's a mindset thing of just like, getting started because, and like, by the way, in academia, this is my problem with academia, it's just like, you're always searching for sort of like the right answer. It can only be the right answer, right? It has to be like perfect. I'm like, no, actually, that's actually incorrect. Like in most startups or even frankly speaking as a VC, where it's like, if you're really good, you're like 1 in 10. I'd say it's probably 1 in 20, right? But if you're a really good investor, like 1 in 20 investments like does really well. All the rest of them die. That's just a reality. And so like, I had to unlearn all these things, right? Like, you go to school, like I went to a pretty decent school and just like all these things where I was like, no, I can't make a mistake. And you're like, no, actually, you just don't know what you don't know when you're actually launching a startup, right? So I would say there's sort of like 3 things. There's sort of the mindset of just like, you have to have faith in yourself, you're going to figure it out. And you have to sort of be very thoughtful about the things that you're working on. Where like, don't work on something just because everyone else is working on it. Yeah. Don't work on something because like, oh, there's a lot of money. So I remember my friend Mike, he's an investor friend of mine who was very, very helpful for me early in my career. One of the things he said is just like, he's like, the people I look for are like, the missionaries, not the mercenaries, right? It's like, there's nothing worse than like the sort of like the MBA type investors where it's like, oh, mobile's really big and fashion's really big and you put them together as a big one massive market. Then you ask the question like, do you read fashion magazines? Are they related? It's like, no, but it's a huge massive market. You're like, those people probably are not going to do well. So it's like, make sure, I was telling some of the companies of like this idea called like the idea maze of just like, for me, when I see a founder who's like, I think more likely to succeed, they've gone through the idea maze. You can tell they've just been thinking about this thing. The point about the idea maze, and so the idea maze is like when you meet a founder, you can tell like they've just been obsessed with this problem, right? Like they've literally been thinking about this like all the time, right? So for me, where it's just like I think about a founder where it's like, well, you might be working on this thing for at least the next 5 to 10 years of your life. Like make sure you're working on something that you actually are interested or really, really care about, right? And so that's really important. But I think like there's sort of 3 or 4 sort of really functional skills. I think I said it in the presentation is like sales, like everything sales, right? Everything you do in a startup is sales, right? Trying to get press, PR, that's sales. Trying to get customers, that's sales. Fundraising is sales. Recruiting people is sales, right? You're trying to recruit this hot like CTO, right? Like this hot shot CTO to bring into a company. Like you're selling them, right? And so the way I think about it, where it's like you're doing sales even without thinking about it, right? You're trying to convince like your spouse to go watch a movie, like that's selling, right? Or you're like, I'd rather have Uzbek food over over McDonald's, like that's sales, right? Like so might as well get good at it.
And then one thing, sorry, yeah. The one thing to add to that is like, we say that triggered by what Marvin said about, he's selling CTO. The other thing is also to recognize that, no one person can do it on your own. It takes a tribe of people. It takes a collection of people to achieve anything. And so being generous rather than cheap, for example, if you have an idea, if you have an idea that you've been thinking, okay, this is something that really bothers me and I really want to do this, then find people that also care about that idea and share with them equity, for example. Be generous with them so that they also then see that they're like a co-owner, because you might get hit by a bus and then that's the end of that startup. But if you've got a bunch of you around the table, then this thing will grow and develop. So
I mean, the reality is that Asher touches on a very, very good point of just like if you think about sort of startups, they're basically religious movements.
Yeah.
Right? Like this thing doesn't really exist, you don't really know. It's just like you're getting people around you. It's just sort of like follow you, right? If you're a leader in a startup, like follow my religious movement right over that one. It really is a religious movement. And so there's an element of like selling to that, whether you like it or not.
Because they're taking pay cuts more often than not, to leaving a cushy job to go earn less.
To join the venture.
And earn 5 times as hard,
Yeah, so I have these conversations all the time with some of my founders. Like, how am I gonna I'm recruiting this guy, and it's just like, but they have this offer from like Google and Facebook. Should I match them? I'm like, why would you match? Like, Facebook and Google pay like so much. Like, you're never ever going to match them. If you start going down a game, you're gonna lose because they're just a different scale. But the way you win is you're selling the adventure, right? You're selling the mission, right? Like, join me on this mission. Like, you might not make it, but like you're gonna learn a lot, right? And so it's just like there's an element of that, and so just like I talk to these founders all the time. They're like, oh, nobody will join me. And I'm like, well, okay, whose fault is that, right? Like how do you explain what you're doing, right? Like, why is this compelling? Like, why should somebody join you? Yeah. Like, if you can't articulate that, which is sales, then you need to sort of rethink that a little bit more, right? And so sales is really everything.
And you want to you're building, right? So you want people who have that dream of building too. And so like, look, I was never an ideas guy. I was an entrepreneur, but I was an ideas guy. I had to partner up with somebody else who had the idea, but they didn't know how to execute, and I knew how to build. Together we built, and so that is kind of like it. It's like there's no perfect whatever. So, a perfect like individual. I mean, there are few and far between.
Those are rare. Those are
rare, and they end up in Silicon Valley. So, so like to me, it's like that building thing, and then the other thing is just getting going. It's like often, for example, sorry, just to be practical about this, I spoke to several startups today, and they were talking about, we don't know how to get this going, and I'm talking about actual founders, people who say they're founders, and I don't think they're ready to be founders yet. And I told them, so how big is your market opportunity? What is your customer problem? They're like, no, I have this idea, and I think this is a great idea. I'm like, yeah, but like, start. And so how do you start? So for example, if you don't know if people care about this problem, go and talk to people, and just go, like, if it's a solution for coffee shops, knock on the door and talk to the coffee shop owners, talk to the customers. Or if it's dentists, then go and talk to dentists. Get 10 dentist appointments if you're struggling, or leverage your parents, your relationships. Start talking to people, start creating some momentum around it, and then before you know it, there's more momentum and there's more need, or not. Like, if there's not, then there's, oh, great, I'm so glad I didn't do anything, because that was like total waste of time, but you learned something. Or there's something that becomes so obvious to everybody that you kind of galvanize people around it, and then before you know it, your uncle's saying, okay, I'll give you money, and somebody else will.
Or even better, you get paying customers.
You get paying
They're
customers.
like, wow,
exactly.
like, this is so awesome. Like, I'd pay money for this. Like, it's shocking of just how quickly these things actually happen.
Yeah. And then another founder asked me a question. They're like, I built the product, but, I can't raise in money. Well, first of all, if you built the product, where are your customers? Go find the customers. If you find customers, you'll get investments. It's not rocket science. It's just use your own logic. Imagine. I think what's lacking in, not just in like this world, this is a global problem that I find in the venture community, is that there's a distinct lack of empathy. Not in the venture community, actually globally, I feel like there's and what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, right? So whether that is your customer, whether that is your investor, whether that is your stakeholder, other stakeholder, it's like, put yourself in their shoes, and then solve their problem, or give them what they want. And often enough, you have 10 things about you, and there's 3 that you care about, and there's 2 that you care about, and there's 1 that he cares about. Well, it's just about that. And so it's really about developing that empathy and going out there and serving your customer, selling to your customer what they need. And when the investor sees that you've got customers that are paying you, then the investor is going to be saying, the reason why I was saying about empathy was like, imagine you had $10,000 in your pocket. So I'm like, okay, if you had $10,000, would you invest in yourself? If you truly, truly, truly would invest in yourself, then okay, fine. But if you push them, you'll find that often 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, maybe I need more homework to do. Well, thank you very much. So think about this. This person is going to invest. If you want somebody to invest money in you, make sure that is money that you're willing to invest in yourself as well. Sorry, just...
No, it's great insight, how to start. Well, and we have like a tradition because our time, I guess, is like.
So we can spend hours, man. Well, like
Yeah,
4
we-
hours.
we-
talk
we
for
like to
hours.
talk.
Well, transition here,
I'm all night, man.
Yeah. It's like our favorite question. What's and we actually ask that question to almost all our speakers here. What's your thoughts on future perspective of the venture industry? What kind of technologies of the future, our audience, our potential startuppers, they should looking for. They should look for what kind of technologies. What's your opinion on the next unicorn technology?
I mean, if I was to start over again, right? I'm a software guy now, so this is what I know. This is how I've done well in, so I'll keep on doing software. But the area that's really interesting right now, if I was starting over again, would probably be in biotech or computational, biology. I think it's super, super interesting. I think all the future I think the first trillionaire is going to be a biotech person. I'm very convinced about that. If I was to start over again. But software is still huge, so I think I'll be fine. I'm not worried. But for me, software is I think areas I think defense tech. There's lots of innovation that needs to happen. There's so many things broken in the defense industry at least in the U.S. and whatnot. There's a lot of things that need to happen. Defense tech, I think climate tech is a massive issue, and so and climate tech is very broad, right? So it could be the software aspect, there could be the energy aspect. There's so many elements of our system as we transition more from the old fossil fuel economy to more of the so-called green economy. I think it's going to take longer than most people think, but that space is huge, right? Energy is life, and so I really think there's literally going to be trillions and trillions of dollars invested in this area because it's fundamental, human society and living growth. That's very I guess esoteric, but it's huge.
So Marvin, takeaways is just biotechnology and energy.
Yeah, those are probably the two big ones. But I'm still bullish on software because if you think about I'll give you an example why I'm super excited about software is how many times when you go to big companies and still use Excel sheets and they use spreadsheets, right? Why do you, I'm not software for this? It's just this makes no sense, right? Or they're throwing bodies at it. Still so many processes where it's wow, that software should be doing that. Shouldn't be throwing people or using Excel spreadsheets. And so I do think there's still lots and lots of opportunities still for software in companies, small companies, big companies. And so I do a lot of investments in that area.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm as I say, pitching my own book, right? But that's where I see a lot of opportunity.
Okay.
So I concur with Marvin on his areas as well. So, but the thing that I find exciting about technology in general, and I've been a software guy like Marvin since the 90s as well, is to me software is just a simple, scalable part of technology, which is exciting, right? And so something easy for me to understand and so I'm always long on software. But to me, the pandemic has led to this massive explosion of opportunity in pretty much every sector you can think of, because this adoption of technology across the board globally at one single point in time has just accelerated opportunities across the board. But if you ask me, for example, what are the 3 things that I'm excited about in the next 100 years? So first of all, caveat, I don't want to go to Mars. I couldn't care less. But I am investing and interested in space tech. The reason why I'm investing in space tech is because I'm a cynic and I don't believe in humanity's ability to get its shit together in time. But what I believe is in our endeavor to go to Mars, we will invest in the technologies that we need to survive in an inhospitable environment, which might be called Earth in the future. But in doing that, and by the way, and that's not me being smart, that's just a proven model. Because if you look at our endeavor to go into space, the human endeavor to go into space, space. That led to that, and obviously killing people, wars. So wars and space are the two catalysts for Silicon Valley, in terms of technological innovation.
Internet
and
came out of it, right?
Internet,
an example.
yeah, so exactly. So to me, that space tech is interesting. Biotech, computational biology, all of that. But to me, my core is AI, ML driven automation. To me, there's so many low-hanging fruits in this, which is going to accelerate. So that those are the two kind of big areas that I'm excited about. And then, of course, I can get into I'm not a fan of Web3, but I do see significant potential in DeFi, where the big boys are now in the US are now starting to get into that space where, instead of having a bank take 5 days to transfer money from Dr. Shaykhov's account to your account in the same bloody city, it's you can use DeFi to basically be able to transfer from you to Japan in a millisecond at a fraction of the cost. And so I think that when we get from Web3 NFTs, whatever the hell that is, to real applications that solve people's problems today, I think that's cool. And then obviously in the future, maybe all of that stuff will also make sense. So those are the 3 things that I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, we're lucky. We're lucky for what we do, right? Because you get to help shape the future, in a tiny way, right? I'm a tiny player, but you get to sort of look at what's happening in the future, and you get to sort of make investments and bets and help some part of that. Hopefully, some of that will come together if you do what you do well and do it right. It's what an incredible privilege.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Incredibly privileged. I think the way I think about my life and my profession, it's I want to do the thing. So I'm intellectually curious. I think most people in our space are. And so what I like is to constantly be the dumbest person in the room, be constantly learning about new things because I'm intellectually curious about things. And as long as I'm learning and being the dumbest person in the room and enjoying the people that I'm with, and I care about what I'm doing, then I think I'll find a way to invest in things that are interesting. And I'm okay with not investing in some amazing tech opportunity and making tons of money. I care about the people, and if there's a person who's an asshole, then I'd rather miss up on that opportunity and go and work with founders, because at some point those founders will do something else, or they'll meet somebody else that they'll introduce me to. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that it's less about the outcome, it's about the journey of working with good people, doing good things, enjoying yourself doing it. And if you just go through the motions and do that, you actually, funnily enough, just money comes, the value comes, the exits come. All of that comes as long as you're just doing the right things.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just make sort of one very, very quick comment where it's just have you heard Def Jam Records? They used to make a lot of good music. Yeah. So it's they're we make music to make money so you can make more music, right? And it's the sort of same thing where I make investments so I can make money so I can make more investments. I'm so lucky I sort of fell into this. And I care, I love what I do, and it's one that I really enjoy the game. So it's just I want to do this for the rest of my life, right? However long it is, I hope it's a long time, but I literally want to do this for the rest of my life. So Ditto. I'm competitive, but at the same time where it's you're just always learning, right? You're always learning in this area, and you really feel like you have impact because we were chatting in the car ride over here where it's I have a lot of founders who've done really, really well, way better than I will ever do in my life, right? Their kids and kids and kids will be taken care of, right? But it's they earned it. And I'm wow, I had a tiny little piece of that. I helped out in a little small way. That's incredibly gratifying, right? It's incredibly gratifying.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to say, just from the both of us, about, and link it to Uzbekistan and our thing here. So what was interesting is before we were coming here, we were telling people, hey, look, we're going to Uzbekistan. We're about to kick something off, and ever had any interest in going to Uzbekistan, just so that we could take a sense. And what was interesting was we talked to a lot of our friends in Silicon Valley, talked to a lot of our friends in other ecosystems, And the funny thing was, as soon as I mentioned, Tashkent, they're like, "Oh, is there a trip to Samarkand or Bukhara or Fergana?" And so I was like, "What?" Like, so the what's interesting is like somehow Uzbekistan seems to be on the map for Silicon Valley. So really, this is a great time to be inviting people over, because there's plenty of people who feel like this is a time, and I think that is maybe in part true because of the fact that there's been some positive changes in your government and governance.
Young population too.
And there's a young population.
People are super
there's
nice
a lot
here
of talent.
too. People are super nice, which is like really helps.
Great weather, good food, scenic, beautiful country. What's not to like? People want to come, but you've been locked in and locked out, and so people are like looking for adventure, and so it's a safe country as well. So this is a great opportunity. I would advise or suggest that you capitalize on that. So
Yeah, and Dr. Shaykhov also wants to add.
Yeah.
Please,
It's maybe returning back to the point about the priorities, the future priorities, or even the present one. I think that's I would like just to look from another angle, because again, there's the climate, the tech, the health tech, the agro tech. I think there's the areas that will be only strongly requirement in the global market because of there's the food security issues, the ecological security issues, and again the health of the people, because especially in the developed countries, that's the aging society is causing a lot of the problems for that, and even in our countries also we see there's some impact of the climate change also to the health. But as I said, I would like just to look to another angle. Actually, if any area that you will pick up just as to be considered, so the smart solutions. So because everyone would like to live better, to do something. We're becoming lazy more and more, and that's why I think this is it will be something that we have to look through and focus on that. And that will give a lot of the solutions for all these areas. That say it doesn't matter, because in different regions, different priorities. And so we have to realize, because we're talking about the market. So there's the global market, but there is the, let's say, regional markets, regional problems, regional challenges. But for Uzbekistan, I'm absolutely sure there's the 3 points that I mentioned. I think that also will be the priority.
Exactly. And also, I will share with you our statistics.
Please.
And we have like absolute champion is biotech.
Okay.
Every single speaker actually mentioned that biotech next unicorn is going to be in biotech. It's like for sure. And unfortunately, none of yours, but DeFi technology also.
Yes.
DeFi technology is our like second place. This is our statistics.
Okay, very interesting.
But the thing, I think the point is like there's going to be so many big, massive markets, right?
Yeah.
Like I think in my presentation where I'm like, I really think sort of like we're in for a couple challenging years, but I think if we do this right, we come on this in the right way, where it's like we're really set up. Like I'm quite bullish for like this idea of sort of the roaring 20s, right? Like, or maybe the raging 20s, but it's like it's right now it's the raging 20s, but we're back in sort of the roaring 20s where like there's a lot of elements, like there's a lot of technological platform changes, there's a whole new generation of sort of like, at least in the US and Western Europe, a lot of the baby boomers are retiring and they're actually moving their money to sort of young, so it's just like new set of customers with money. There's just lots of things. We're in the middle of a massive change, and with every single massive change, it's scary. Like I'm a Taurus, so like a fixed sign, as they say in astrology. I don't like change, but I'm like, yes, but you also recognize these are also where all the big opportunities actually show up. And so it's about sort of, like I said, chance favors superior mind. So it's about being ready for it and actually taking action, right? Like,
and what Dr. Shaykhov talking about, around you call it lazy. To me, lazy is just another word for efficiency. It's like efficiency, automation. This is a global trend. Like people realize that there are better ways to do things. So to me, that is a big, massive. So the thing is, people look at that market today and they say, oh, it's already a big market. But the thing is, what they fail to realize is that market is now an 8 billion people market. And so it just expanded, which means that the opportunity set just expanded. So yes, it's an existing market, but it's just massive TAM expansion. No, or addressable market expansion. And then, of course, food security, I think, is something I'm surprised that food security doesn't pop up more often. It's not,
It
one
will.
of my core areas.
I think it will. It's happening. It's happening, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's
like
happening.
in the
It will.
Middle East,
It
for
will.
example, food security is like top of mind. Food security is top of mind in many places, and it's just going to become. I've merged food security into like NASA, my space thing. So my space thing is climate tech and food security. That's kind of like my sort of hub on that. But no, great to see you're looking at big markets, Dr. Shaykhov.
Yeah, so gentlemen, it was really insightful, and I'm talking not only about Lee's talk, but also about the conference. It was really insightful. It was really helpful for all people who actually visited that conference this morning. Well, and I think, and I'm really sure that we're going to meet soon.
So we're going to do part 2.
Yes.
We should do part 2 sometime,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Next year. Part 2 next year.
That was my point. So we're going to have
It's a day.
part 2.
Well, and we'll make like 3 hours. 3 hour discussion.
In April. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's set a date in April, and we will do this again. So first of all, thank you very much
Thank you for having us.
us.
Yeah, it was so
And
much
it
fun.
was a pleasure to be here, and
Yeah.
looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir.
It's
you.
really
It was fun.
pleasure to be
It
here.
was so much
Thank
fun.
you.
Yeah.